Welcome to another edition of BCR Webcasting. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jeff Longhurst. Jeff is a non-executive director at Credebt, and he's also an advisor to the industry with great experience over many, many years across several forms of practitioners, independent and bank-owned. Jeff, welcome. Jeff, we're going to
Yeah.
talk about the roundtable sessions we had at the recent UK Invoice Finance Summit last month. And the particular roundtable that you were part of was looking at the issue of how to grow the sector in the UK, the invoice finance sector, and particularly the issue of client numbers. So this has been talked about for a long, long time. Client numbers haven't really shifted or risen for quite some time now, probably 10 years or more. There has been growth in terms of volume, but this was very much about what do we do about client numbers? And I think it was a very good session at the time. But just in your own words, just tell me briefly what the problem is with client numbers.
Yeah. I think, I mean, the round table was headlined supply and demand, and I think it was very clever to have actually put it that way rather than to say, what do we do about the fact that the client numbers using invoice finance has shrunk, and so therefore it was important to look at both the supply of finance, but also why it is that people aren't taking up the option of invoice finance in the way that they used to. And 20% down in numbers over 10 years is quite a lot. And whereas advances and sales have increased by about 14% over that period. So there's a bit of a sort of an imbalance there. And what we see is that larger clients, it's sort of the M's and the SME, the sort of 10 to 50 million pound businesses have been taking up invoice finance more and more and more, but the smaller businesses have not. And so is that because they don't want it? Is it because it's not available anymore? There are a number of different issues that we looked at.
And availability is an issue, isn't it? Because the banks have largely pulled out of
Yeah,
SMEs.
we look at all of the banks now stopping funding, providing invoice finance to the smaller businesses, but and that's an issue in some ways because there are loads of independent businesses that could take that up, but they haven't in the volume that the banks have been shifting away from it. Traditionally, invoice finance built up through the support of the banks. They moved to the bank because they didn't know where else they could get invoice finance from, and so perhaps that lack of knowledge is still relevant. And that's something that the people participating in the roundtable felt that lack of knowledge, that lack of information, was definitely a constituent part of the fact that people aren't taking up invoice
Yeah.
finance.
So
And we look,
let's look at the suggested solutions that came
yeah,
up because it's
yeah,
clearly a very important issue. Um,
yeah,
and as you say, education was an important point that was raised. People just
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know about invoice finance, or they don't know, let's say, the detail about it. Some people think it's more expensive than it actually is, and there are lots of advisors out there who also don't understand.
And this has been an issue for the 40 years that I've been involved in invoice finance. We've said, well, why is it that accountants and influencers don't realise the benefits of invoice finance? There is a misunderstanding about price, and there is a misunderstanding about, well, if you're using invoice finance, well, there must be a problem with our business. We must be failing, and a lot of that has actually moved on. People are less concerned now about disclosure, and that's I've been helped, I think, by the fact that you've been able to do single invoice finance, and with single invoice finance, you have to have disclosure, and the perception that a business is failing has therefore actually dissipated to a certain extent. There's also the feeling for those that do know that maybe they're handing over control to a third party and there's concern about the relationship with customers. All of these things have been around for as long as I've been in invoice finance. Some are better than they were, some aren't. But there was a genuine feeling that the biggest issue still, felt by the members of the round table, was that we are not getting our message across to small businesses and the people that influence them as to the benefits of invoice finance and how it can work for them. Everyone round the table understood that once the client starts using invoice finance, then the clients love it. They love the fact they can help to grow the business. Yes, there are issues in terms of, will this invoice be financed? Will that not be financed? But for the majority of businesses, uh, once people are using invoice finance, they see the benefits. They know they can go forward. So how do we get more and more businesses to actually understand that? And it's education, it's making people aware. We also have some issues as well because culturally people are used to going online now and going a few clicks, and we've got
Exactly.
the funding that
People expect speed and efficiency.
yeah, and so
And
there is still a big need for further development of IT. AI, I'm sure, is going to be a big benefit in enabling businesses to onboard more quickly. I think particularly to handle things like reconciliation, so that takes away some of the workload, the drudgery, for want of a better word, of using invoice finance once you're on board. If that simplifies it, it'll help the relationship between client and provider, and also it should bring costs down because you don't need the sort of the numbers of people to go through the reconciliations check to see that they're okay. So I think IT AI is something we need to invest in, and the members of the roundtable, well done. I'm voicing their thoughts here.
commoditization was also mentioned. So do you see all this helping move towards a more commoditized product?
The feeling was that we are a service industry, and because of it's built on funding built on a relationship and built on trust, we will still need to do things like surveys. We will still need to do verifications, etc. And so, although we could look at certain sectors to commoditize the product, I don't think that's something that could be appropriate across the board. I think the particular areas where commoditization can come into play actually is in the smaller ticket side. And that's the area we're looking at. That's the area we really need to grow. Trying to get a £20,000 line, a £50,000 invoice finance line is really, really difficult because the cost of putting them on board is almost the same as putting on a £20 million line. So commoditization in those areas, in simple, straightforward products for smaller businesses, has to be possible. And yet again, IT, AI are the means of actually achieving those ends.
To what extent do you think the independents are achieving that, the small ticket, addressing the small ticket market? The banks clearly can't do it.
Yeah, there's a will to do that. And coming back to the service-driven uh, aspects of the facility, I think they're really, really good at that. And they will actually invest in time, resource, people to actually give the service to those smaller businesses. But the smaller businesses have to be aware of it in the first place. And I think, because the banks are not pushing it as a concept, and they're the ones that have got the cash and the capacity to push it, then those smaller businesses are going to find it fairly difficult to actually take up the volumes they'd really, really want. So they have a role to play in getting out to see accountants and influencers again. But it's going to be hard, and I think those smaller independents, there's a gap. But how much of that gap is being taken by alternative finance as well? We need to actually simplify the way we provide things to make it simpler for those businesses to come on board and approach those independents.
How do you see this moving forward, Jeff? So, it was a very interesting discussion, interesting, valuable suggestions for solutions to fix this problem of growing the industry, particularly client numbers.
Yeah.
How do you see this moving forward and getting some traction here?
There was definitely a will around the round table to actually try and work together to find solutions as an industry. rather than as independent, individual, small businesses, large businesses. And I think that if we're going to take this forward, if we're going to get the numbers back to where they were and increase them still further, then we have to do it as an industry, not as separate bodies. We're getting very good support from the IT providers. And as I said earlier, IT AI is going to help to actually make delivery of the product simpler, is going to enhance the relationship between client and provider. But it's not going to work if individual businesses try and do it all by themselves. We need to actually come together as an industry to try and we've got the solution. We think we know the solution's there, but actually work to get the results from pushing through from commoditization, better IT, more awareness, more education, etc.
So did you see this as a very valuable exercise at the summit?
I think the beauty of having the round table at the summit was actually to find that will was there and to actually bring the people together. And if we don't have these sort of conferences, then there isn't an opportunity for businesses to come together to talk, to work on these sort of areas and find solutions. I think the other benefit as well is by having that sort of conference, you bring in the likes of UK finance, the British Business Bank, firms of accountants, etc. So you can actually broaden the scope of the discussions and also bring to those parties an awareness of what the issues are and what needs to be done to actually help to support SMEs. We have to remember this is at a time where government are actually canvassing finance associations and the finance industry generally to say, what do we need to do to support SME finance? Well, there's no better product to support SME growth than invoice finance. And by having the capacity to talk about that sort of thing in a conference, bringing all these parties together, it's got to be good for the industry to help it go forward. And the more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the more the merrier. We're going to be doing it again at Receivables Finance International, different topics.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
on the 21st and 22nd of May
yeah,
at the offices of Clifford Chance in Canary
yeah.
Wharf. But we felt as an organizer that the roundtable sessions worked very well, and the feedback certainly suggested that.
Good.
Thanks very much indeed for your time today, and let's see if we can move this forward and bring some new
Yeah,
ideas and some benefit to the sector.
let's hope so. And look forward to seeing you at RFIX. Thank
Look
you.
forward to seeing you too. Thank you.
Bye.